Hello.
Check, check. Checkity check, check.
Checkity check check.
No.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah.
Hello.
Good
How
morning.
are you all?
Excellent.
A little chilly.
A little chilly, huh? How's your snow down there?
About an inch and a half and counting.
Yeah, it's on up here. They weren't kidding.
Yeah.
How about you, Christian? What's going on up there or wherever you are?
Christian actually made it to town.
Oh, we did? Okay.
And he hasn't made it across the street yet. He's got 5 minutes.
He's stuck.
He's stuck.
There, he just walked in. We're keeping tabs on him.
Jody
Yes.
picked everybody up.
She offered to pick me up, and I've seen her drive, so I declined.
I think that's wise. Mary's got a lot of snow.
Good morning. Interesting. Um, I think I asked Carolina, but Ken, do you know when budget week is? Is it always the same? What is it?
I had a vacation plan. That one got moved.
Yeah, that'd be a tough one to miss.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just
Yo.
zoom in.
Whatever you sent, I accepted. Yep. Yep. I call to order our formal BOC meeting on February 13th at 10 a.m. Ken, would you lead us in the flag salute? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. Item C is calendar session. Does anybody have any additions, subtractions, changes that they want to see made?
I think you and I are scheduled to do some HHS tours
Yes.
together.
Just getting those on my calendar right now. And I was asking Ken about budget week to make sure we don't overlap with something on there, but yep.
Yeah. I believe that was all that I had on mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Stewart.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, nothing.
Perfect. Ken?
Yeah, just a reminder, we'll be closed on Monday for the holiday.
Okay, cool. All right, moving on to public comment. I know there was one public comment emailed in. I just want to make sure everybody got that. Is there anybody in the audience that has public comment on anything that's not on the agenda? Is there anybody online? Raise your virtual hand. Seeing none, moving on. Item E is department updates. We have none for this week, but next week it looks like we have an update from Cynthia and the transit. Next up is item F, which is our work session. And F1 is discussion of opioid settlement funds and possible detox center. Good morning. Do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So maybe just a little bit of historical sort of what's been happening and where we are at. As a state, it's probably no surprise that we have a pretty significant lack of both detox and alcohol and drug residential treatment beds. Those that has been something that has been in place for a number of times in terms of the deficit. However, we've seen such an increase in need that it's being felt much more substantially than it has been historically. There have been a number of things happening over the course of the last few years that have added some capacity at the state level for detox, although even with those added beds, we're still feeling a definite pinch in the ability to get people into treatment. That's something I hear from my staff, but also what I hear from community members and also community partners who also work with individuals that they're trying to get into detox. So as we're thinking through different opportunities that may come in front of us, I think there's a couple of things that we can be thinking about. One, of course, we've got the county's opioid settlement dollars that could be used. I mean, certainly a detox facility is something that falls under the purview of what those funds could be used for. There have been conversations, really public meetings around a potential partnership with the city of McMinnville. Of course, all of that would have to take whatever process and decisions made on behalf of the city as well. But there have been the two meetings, one a training and then a full day session really talking about the various ways opioid settlement funds can be used and if there is potential for a detox center. I am meeting with our local CCO and the regional partners of other community mental health programs sometime in March. That is at the request of the governor's office, who has put together a group or has really requested that CCOs pull together their regions to talk about ways that they could increase capacity for detox facilities. I don't have really more details other than what I just shared, which was, hey, these meetings are going to get scheduled. We need you to be there. So for us, that means the community mental health programs and their directors in Marion County and Polk County, myself, and I'll likely take our behavioral health director, Jason Hennis, as well. And then our CCO, Yamhill CCO, and the one that covers the majority of Marion and Polk, which happens to be Pacific Source. Those meetings, that meeting has not been scheduled, although I do have a meeting the week of the 24th to talk with the community mental health directors in those other two counties, just so that we can really get a sense of what might be happening in other counties before we have that larger meeting that will involve the CCOs. Again, don't have a lot of details of what that might be. It could be anything from an ask from the CCOs to just trying to get a better sense of what's happening locally. So that is also just out there in play. Where I'm at right now in terms of this priority, which has been a priority of the local alcohol and drug planning committee, which is a group that's advisory to the Board of Commissioners, and Commissioner Sarah sits on, you know, as well as just, again, back to the community need and what we're hearing. The challenge that I'm having right now is in my opinion, we need to take a couple of steps to really flush out what this would look like and what this would cost. It's difficult to make requests for funds when I don't have a good sense of how many dollars we're talking about. And so I think one of the things that we should be thinking about is how do we get to that next step of being sort of what they call, you know, shovel ready, whether we're talking about federal funds, whether we're talking about funds that could come available through the legislative session, or even just making asks to other partners, right? We need to get a little bit closer to that shovel ready project. And for me, one of the big steps would be identifying potential location or locations, and then assessing and understanding how much it would cost to either purchase and renovate, or if it's already an owned property, the renovation costs, because then I'm able to take the next steps of saying, okay, well, this is what we need and this is how I can get it. So happy to answer other questions, but that's just a little bit of where we're at today.
Yes, no, that's great. And I appreciate all those different groups that you mentioned being involved in the summit the last couple weeks that we've had. It really helps a lot to be able to gauge and see, kind of basically put all the different ideas in order. And I know that one of the ideas that floated to the top was some form of detox or sobering center. So I just appreciate you guys being involved in that. Commissioner Sterrett, you want to kick us off with comments?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Manfred. I know this has been in discussion for years, and I appreciate your commitment, even though we didn't know how much we had or what was actually going to transpire. I do want to just ask a couple of questions off the top. I know something came up in our Public Safety and Veteran Steering Committee on Monday, and the question was, could we use some of these opioid settlement funds for any kind of specific, earmarked specifically for any specific veterans program? And I didn't know if you'd considered that.
I'm happy to speak to that if the question was for me. So I don't know that there's anything that would preclude you from identifying specific populations that you would work with, in this case, veterans. However, anything you did would have to be specific to something allowable within the settlement Exhibit E, as we call it. It's become the famous exhibit now, and it outlines all of the things. And so they do, it really would need to be specific to opioid use disorder treatment or prevention.
So it's not necessarily the population, it's the services being provided.
Correct. I think you could say, we're providing this service as it's related to opioid use disorder or prevention, and we're specifically working with veterans. I think you could zero in onto a certain population as long as it was still related to opioid use, treatment, prevention, in that realm, and something identified in that exhibit.
Okay, and just two more real quick questions. I know you were there with Chair Johnston and I at the summit, the second one we just had. And there was a lot of talk about, you know, people just really trying to define their terms in terms of sobering center, detox center. And there was a lot of misunderstanding about what actually those two things are. So if you could basically do that, and then also I wanted to address those community initiative, the project funds, the SIP funds, which we have a deadline of the 23rd. And there was a webinar on Friday that we attended and really outlined some of the requirements. And I wanted to go over those before we got too far in when we were talking about imminent federal funds, because it's not looking like it's just that easy to just go submit and then get them.
I'm happy to speak to the difference between a sobering center and a withdrawal management center, often called a detox. So sobering centers can look a lot of different ways. They have some that are run through staff who have some level of medical training, or they have them where they are run through peers that don't have any medical training. Really, a sobering center is a place for someone to go who is incapacitated because of drugs or alcohol, with the idea that here's somewhere safe for them to go. They don't need any medical treatment. They're not they're not concerned about safety to themselves or someone else. They just need somewhere to go. And I think that the phrase that was used at that meeting, right, was to sleep it off, if that makes sense, right? Versus what we're talking about with the sort of technical term of a withdrawal management program that has multiple levels, where you are actually helping someone detoxify their system, getting this stuff out of their system, whatever that might be, whether it's fentanyl, alcohol, or you name it, anything else. And generally speaking, when someone is at a level 4 medically managed withdrawal center, which is what I think is what we are in need of in our community, there's some underlying concern that they may have health issues because of the detoxification process. It is not uncommon for someone who's detoxing off of fentanyl to have things like seizures, you name it. Certainly alcohol can be quite dangerous to withdraw from. So the idea with those centers you are staffed 24/7 with nurses who are providing medications, who are ensuring people are staying hydrated, who are providing immediate care if 911 has to be called. And then they also have a physician that is not necessarily on site 24/7, but is at least has eyes on patients, at a certain volume over the course of a day. So it's a much more medicalized model, and it really is what we're seeing the biggest deficit in. I do think that there has been interest in our community of a sobering center over the course of a number of years. Again, very different than an actual withdrawal management or detox center. I think the idea of having a place to drop people off sounds very alluring, and it is, right? I mean, at face value, I do think that we have tried to be a place where if someone is caught by law enforcement with drugs on them, and maybe they rather than just letting them go and saying, hey, here's the new deflection process, we have said, if they have the ability, they're welcome to drop those people off in our clinic and we'll do an assessment. Certainly if someone is so inebriated they can't do an assessment, there's not a lot we can do. But there have been historic challenges that we've heard from law enforcement around capacity to drive someone to drop them off, which makes complete sense. And so that's not anything other than, yes, staffing is challenging and there's a lot of place for those officers to be. So I just wonder, but it does call into question and make me wonder, would we see a sobering center utilized to the extent that perhaps we're thinking about? And the answer may be yes, I don't know, but those are the things that I think about when I'm wondering what it would look like if we rolled it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For me, as we progress through this discussion, and this is just early phases, what it looks like for the other detox facilities that are in our area. The biggest one for the one room that's at the Willamette Valley Medical Center, that maybe we bring them into this conversation of if there's room for expansion out there so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I know there's another place in Newburgh, but there's options, I guess, for a first step to kind of reach out to them and see if there's something in the immediate timeframe that we can do to help them to expand their services. Commissioner King, anything?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Starrett had a question or maybe a comment about the SIP funding, and I kind of brought that up and initiated that conversation. And after conversations with Director Manfrin, I think it's a little bit of the cart before the horse. And I know that we don't like to get money that we don't know what it's for yet. So just for the sake of getting money. And I completely agree with that. So I think conversation we've had is to maybe hit the pause button on the SIP funding for now until we have a little bit more of a better idea of what that will look like or what the needs are, a little bit more specific of we have a place, we know what it will cost. And so I know we have a building that we have talked about, or at least Ken and I have talked about, or Director Manfrin and I. And I don't know if we can talk about that here or not, but I wonder if we can use some of those opioid monies to figure out if that's worth it or not, to hire an architect to, I don't know if that falls in the purview of what we can use that money for or not, but, just a little bit to kind of identify this is possible with that building or it's not possible. There's pros and cons, I know, to that specific space. And so, but we haven't really talked about that in this public arena yet. So
Commissioner Starrett?
And respond to that? 'Cause I seemed that was a question for you.
Oh, me? Yes. In terms of if that would be helpful, I think, yes, I think that in order to sort of move to getting us to a place where we are, quote unquote, shovel ready, as the legislature likes to call things that sometimes get funded, right? I think that would be a good next step. I think identifying, again, just getting a general ballpark sense of how much money we are talking about would be of significant value. One thing I would just add too, I think looking at our community partners who are already doing this type of work is really a great idea. I think the things that we will want to be mindful of is ensuring that if we are working with a provider to provide these services, they are ones that are providing detox for opioids and not just alcohol, because we do see that, and that they are accepting Medicaid. I think that's a big deficit too. So we'll just want to be making sure that those are pieces that we're in tune with.
Commissioner Starrett, your hand is up. That's why I called on you. But if you do.
Yeah, no, I was just waiting for that response, but thank you, Chair. A couple of things. I wanted to go back to those community initiated project, the funding, Senate appropriations is going to be taking a look at those. And we're pretty aggressive when it comes to looking at those on a regular basis. One of the concerns about this particular bucket of money and the application needed to be submitted by the 23rd is that $1 to $2 million is what they're looking at would most likely be funded. It would have to be shovel ready. There has to be a budget. There has to be a deliverables, and there has to be an intention. And we don't have any of those things. And I don't think it's because of anything we have neglected to do. I know Director Manfrin has been all over this from day one. Our former chair has made this a priority. But I think also in terms of the timeline of the funding, we have to remember that until March comes, we aren't even going to see the fiscal year 25 appropriations perhaps approved. We don't know if they will be. But as far as this bucket of money, if it were approved, if our project were approved, it would go through a phase from February. If it was approved, it would go to July of 26, and we couldn't expect to get a check till sometime after September 30th of 26. So I think we need to be looking at the money that we do have, acknowledge that we never were ready for the SIP funds, and not to chase that rabbit hole, but also to look at, I want to go back to Provoking Hope. They're in the process of trying to buy a building. They've got a really big building. They do a big piece of this. They obviously don't have the detox piece, but I think that working with the other partners, looking at the buildings we do have, and acknowledging that this is going to be a heavy lift. I think we're well on our way.
Thank you. I know my biggest concern after the summit at the Civic Center, when the Stedman Group brought up that, and it was, I'm sure if you're in the HHS realm, you're fully well aware of it, but it was a surprise to me that when it's, I guess, a Medicaid program, that you can't designate beds for McMinnville, Yamhill County, or your region. It is the first come, first serve on a statewide basis.
Yes, and there's a couple of caveats. They just happen, one of them just happens to be a very expensive caveat, which is you are able to, if both, parties agree, of course, that the facility running the program has to agree, you can reserve beds, you're just paying for them. So you're paying for them if they're full, you're paying for them if they are not full.
Okay.
And so there are times where something like that can happen. That happens both on the alcohol and drug side as well as the mental health side. There are places that you can reserve some of those beds as well. The other option that I have seen talked about is having a sort of first right of refusal for the county in which, the program resides in. And so before they fill a bed, they theoretically, right, would be calling to check in to say, hey, do you have anyone? And if we say no, then they could open it to someone else. So I've heard about some of those other things. I haven't dived too deeply into them, but I have heard that those are options. I think right now, as a state, we're in this place that we just have such a deficit that the more and more we have of these programs, the less likely we're going to see other places or people from other places, other geographically coming into Yamhill County. But the fact of the matter is right now, we have one bed for non-Medicaid, alcohol-only detox in our entire county. The facility that is in Newburgh has a footprint in Newburgh and provides some services, but it's not detox. That their facility is in Portland. And so really the majority of time someone is going to detox, it means either someone is driving them or we're working to find transportation for them to go to the coast or to Eastern Oregon, most likely.
Which leads me to a couple more things. One, Stedman Group did follow up with us. Now, I don't know if it was Colorado-based surveys that they were gleaning their information from, but they were saying that most people in need will not travel more than 30 minutes for a facility. I know just personally, I'm out of that 30 minutes. I traveled an hour for a family member, so I'm not quite sure that probably we need to review where they get that information from, which leads to my next concern that I've heard over the last couple of weeks since this summit happened was bringing people into our area. And then when they are done going through the program, what after that? Are they just released onto, into McMinnville? And there's huge concern with that.
Yeah, they're great. They're great questions. I'm not familiar with the data that was quoted in the meeting that from the Stedman Group. Doesn't mean it's not accurate. It's not data that I'm familiar with, so I can't speak to it. What I can share is that a frequent reason we have individuals who choose not to go into a detox facility is because it's too far away and they don't want to leave largely their families.
Yeah.
And so I think that I could see there being some layer of truth. I don't know what the right, distance is, but I do think anecdotally we hear that distance is a barrier for people to go just because they don't want to leave their roots, the folks here with them. So I think what happens after someone leaves detox, well, in an ideal setting, right, and we're far from ideal, but in an ideal setting, what would happen is someone would go through a detox program. They would then go into a 30, 60, 90-day residential treatment program, and then they would come out and go into a sober housing program, right? And then where they're learning all of those skills of just like getting jobs and kind of getting reacquainted with sort of the typical general community as we all know it. So I think there's a lot of layers there. We certainly have gaps in a lot of those
Right.
those pieces of the sequence there. when we have someone who would be enrolling in our services at Health and Human Services, our intent would be that we work similarly to how we do when someone's coming out of the jail, which is if we know that they're getting released or discharged that day, we're at the door waiting for them. And we've got a goodie bag of here's some things to get you through the next few days. Where are you sleeping tonight? Let's go over to our office. Let's make sure we've got all of our stuff in order. What do you need? So that's what we would want to do for those people who were going to be in Yamhill County. I think there is some care management, case management, care coordination, things that happen within these detox programs, and the level of which they do those things, connecting people back to the communities that they're coming from, is really going to land on a partnership between the provider doing the detox and the community that they are going back to.
Can we put those stipulations on when somebody enters into the program?
I would think that if there was some sort of contractual agreement with the county and a provider, I would imagine there could be provisions around expectations of them coordinating care. I don't think that, and this is where probably Christian could weigh in more than me. I don't want to overspeak, but I would be surprised if there was anything that could be built in that said, you couldn't let them leave your facility in Yamhill County. They had to be driven back somewhere else, right? I don't think that there's a safeguard to say that if someone decided to leave, because these are voluntary programs, that they couldn't just leave.
Yeah.
But I think we could put stipulations in around expectations of care coordination with the provider if there was some sort of contractual agreement between the county and them.
If both commissioners don't mind, I actually forgot to ask for public comment, and I do know, I believe one at least. So I'm going to ask for anybody online to raise their hand
You asked.
if they, for non-agenda items. This
Oh,
one,
sorry.
I forgot to ask for this agenda. And I believe Charles, if he wants to make a public comment. And I'll put it in the public comments portion too. Chaz actually submitted a letter also. So go ahead, Chaz, if you want to go ahead and make your public comment.
Yeah, great. Sorry, you guys caught me a little out of breath here. Can you hear me okay?
Sorry.
Yep. All right. My name is Chad Gibbons. I lead the McMinnville Task Force. I'll just read off my letter here.
Sure.
I want to express my concerns about the placement of the detox facility in McMinnville. We recognize the critical need for this facility for people struggling with addiction and mental health challenges. But we strongly believe that placing it in our downtown core will cause lasting harm to our local businesses and tourism. McMinnville's downtown falls within a designated urban renewal zone, extending from Baker Street through the Granary District. The stated purpose of this URZ is to promote economic vitality, tourism, and revitalization. But our downtown's already facing significant challenges due to a growing population of unhoused, vagrant, and addicted individuals. Let's see. As the county seat, McMinnville has taken on a disproportionate share of Yamhill County social services. Within and around the urban renewal zone, we already have numerous existing facilities, including the Navigation Center, Provoking Hope, the county jail, and Health and Human Services, and several churches providing meals and support. While these services are necessary, their concentration in and around our downtown directly conflicts with the urban renewal zone's mission. You guys already addressed the first come, first served basis. That is a concern as well, since we already have an influx of people coming from other areas who stay for the services. So we would just like to respectfully request that a detox facility be located at least 1 mile outside of the urban renewal zone. And if you guys do plan to proceed to place the facility in the urban renewal zone, we would like a public hearing so the businesses and citizens can express their concern. And that's pretty much it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else online? Seeing none. Okay. Sorry about that. Coming back. Any follow-up?
I know that, sorry, I know that, when I've had conversation with, new mayor of McMinnville, that was also a concern. I don't think we've actually named place that we've been looking at. I think if it's okay to say that, Ken, is that all right? Yeah, I mean, we floating the idea of the annex building, right? Around. So I do know that that is a concern that I've heard in the community. It is a building that we own currently, so it's, like I said, there's pluses and minuses with that, but I do want to take that into consideration, the economic vitality of downtown McMinnville and where it's at and the services that kind of surround Third Street. And, you know, just not just from the county, but also churches and soup kitchens and, you know, all of the services from, you know, YCAP and all of them. So it is something that I think we do need to consider when we are placing, but we do own that building.
Sure. Commissioner Stewart?
Thank you. If I could just comment, and perhaps Director Manfred can jump in here. I have two things I wanted to dovetail into this. First, a comment regarding that. I think there is a big difference between someone who deliberately enters into a recovery path with a stated and directed and supported program, and somebody who is going to a church or a navigation center with which low barrier. In other words, you're an addict. We're going to feed you. We're going to clothe you. We're going to support your addiction because that's what, you know, that's the mission, which I think is wholly misguided. We're helping people die slowly. But a detox center is basically for people who have made a decision to go into recovery. And I think you have different behaviors related to that. That's just what my my observation has been, and perhaps Director Manfred, you could address the concerns. I totally get it, because I think the folks in McMinnville, especially the business owners, have had it, and I don't blame them. But this is not the type of person who's going to be going, still using, getting their meals, and going from service to service to service, and there's a big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of what you're saying is really accurate. These are voluntary services, and they're not easy, and it's not pretty, right? Going through withdrawal in a facility like this, people are not sort of wandering about. They are sick. They feel sick. They are in bed. They are getting medications through IVs. They are, really needing 24/7 nursing support. And so I think it probably does look different than, say, some of the other services that we've talked about, just because of sort of the state that people are in while they're there, as well as the things that you touched on, Commissioner, around this, the fact that they are taking a pretty significant step in terms of that recovery path. So I do think that there's a lot of accuracy to that.
And if I can just mention, this is an item that is later on our agenda, and ask Director Manfred if we could be looking at sort of a collaboration with Community Justice. I know they have that program for women, and they have that day management center, which has been a real game changer in terms of, this is directed toward women who have been in justice involved, but it's a welcoming place for them to have a kitchen, to have their kids there, to have, all of the wraparound services to keep them out of a carceral setting. I'm wondering if there could be some connection with what we do with the opioid money and what's already established with that reallocation of the JRI funds.
I think potentially, certainly. I think that could be an option.
Thank you. Yeah, you want to, I know we had a discussion yesterday when we kind of toured the annex on, you know, quite a bit of history on that building and what could potentially be added on to it, the layout of it, and also maybe touch on, I like the positioning of it based on, and this is nothing set in stone, but possibly the community center or a new rec center with McMinnville, and that being removed from the equation of a community center being right next to the detox facility.
Yeah, I think this is, I'm listening to the conversation, and I think the challenge that we have here, it's kind of the chicken or the egg, because, we're having discussions and it sounds like based on the discussion, we're talking, kind of going back to where Lindsay started off, we're talking more of I'm going to call it a detox, not a sobering center, which, thank you for clarifying kind of that thing. I think one of the challenges that we have when we talk about facilities and location that, I'm not familiar with what an actual facility, how many beds, what does it look like? What are the amenities required in the facility? A lot of that planning, so it's really hard. We do think, with ideas and looking at our strategic capital plan, and the consolidation that we're doing with the facilities, it seems like the annex is one that we have, listed as possibly, becoming available when we start consolidating departments, and just like you were saying, knowing some of the history around that building and the original design. And if you spend time in that building, you can see how it was originally designed, not just for parole and probation, but it was designed at one point to have some treatment services there. And with its proximity, and it has kind of some barriers around it as far as its interface with the surrounding community. But I recognize that that's probably a process that comes down the road. And, and I think that's one of the hardest parts we always run into when we have a concept like this. We're not sure exactly what it means, what this facility looks like. We're not sure what the renovation costs are going to be, because if we're going in and if it ends up looking like basically a hospital wing or something like that, because it's pretty intense medical. So you're converting what are currently offices into patient rooms with restrooms and plumbing and things like that. I think that's going to be some of the difficulties and that's where I kind of come back. I think it'd be really good to start putting together some type of a feasibility or starting to put plans to kind of define what this, because it seems like based on the discussion, we're, like I said before, it sounds like we're talking more detox than a sobering. So at least we're starting to narrow a little bit on what this facility is going to look like. But, and the second part would be is one, we would do much like we did with our other planning that we did for facilities. We're going to look at our existing inventory and see what might be able to fit that mold. Or we could be looking at, if it comes, you go through the process, and if there's concern around siting or concern about limitations or costs with developing that building, then you kind of expand from there and you look at, well, what other facilities could potentially be available for an acquisition or new construction. It seems like all of that should be kind of vetted through a little more formal process. And then also keeping in mind, because I kind of see two tracks, because based on a lot of the discussions, you have the capital portion of it, which is the facilities itself, but then there's the operational component, and then figuring out the funding, the limitations, the things about, transportation, connectivity, all those things. So it's almost, I see two parallel tracks going on, because right now we don't have the facility. And even if we had the facility, then we'd have to talk about who's operating and the operational components of it as well. That also needs to, that discussion needs to be happening as well, because we do have, like we've shared before in the budget, the opioid funds, we have 1.4 million that has not been spent yet. That sounds like a big number. And I recognize that for a lot of folks, that is a big number. But if we're getting into a major capital improvement, I have a hard time, I've never been into a detox. I don't know what's all involved with that. It could end up that whole 1.4 million for building a facility. I don't know. Right. And then the question comes in on sustainability for the operational component on how is that going to be funded moving forward? As kind of coming back, and sorry if this is what I do, I think out loud, and so my apologies. But The one thing that I will say is with the opioid settlement funds, we have the balance now because we haven't spent those funds. We haven't identified uses and started spending those funds. So that 1.4 million that we have does not mean that that's not what we're accruing on an annual basis. It's a little closer to about 300,000 a year, I think. But it's a mess because there's so many different settlement payments and schedules and amount that are coming into this. And I say that because it's, their pay down schedule, it's not forever. I think the longest term is 15 years for some of the payments, and we're already several years in.
15 to 18 years. But
Right.
a lot of these defendants are paying ahead.
Right.
So we're only 2 years into some of the settlements, and we've already received 4 or 5 payments.
Yeah,
yeah.
and during like the summit, I'm not sure how they came to the numbers that they did, but for McMinnville, they're sitting on over 400,000,
Mhm.
and they're estimated in that 18-year period to pull in a little over 1.4
Right.
million. So I don't know what our calculations are, or if our settlements are different based on that, but I know what we have in the bank account, and I think that's really what
And so I'm saying that, it seems like, at least from, as a budget officer, as a recommendation, it seems like these funds, because they'll sunset, they're not forever funds, and that probably the focus capital type one-time and, versus operations, I think would be a better use for the funds, because again, it'll eventually sunset, and depending on, and in talking to Lindsay, the conversations we had, we know probably the biggest hurdle to get over is going to be that facility and that initial capital investment to have the facility, and then the operation will continue to have those discussions. So
Sure.
I don't know if that helped or hurt, but I'm just looking at it from just an opioid settlement fund. I will say that we do have the funds fully appropriated. We haven't identified any use. So, I mean, if the board wants to entertain the idea of some type of a contract, or we start looking at bringing in either architecture services or something like that to start doing some of that feasibility study.
And I
We
think
could
that's a
do
good
that.
direction, but what I'd want to do is get with Stedman Group first. Maybe they have something, or have, based on number of beds, maybe they have a rough idea of what it would cost per bed in a certain layout facility. Commissioner Starrett, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. This is a question for Director Manfred. I know we talked about operationally, if we did have a partner who would operate this. Can you clarify? I think we talked about private pay being able to carry this across the finish line in terms of ongoing operation, and then the distinction between the Medicaid funding of something like this, and then the ability to use additional type of, let's say, flex funds from the CCO.
Sure. From an operational standpoint, the idea behind maintaining the facility and the staffing and all that goes along with that would be through insurance billing. That would be insurance billing to private insurance as well as Medicaid. So that is how you sustain those programs, is through insurance billing. My understanding from when I have talked with providers who do provide this service is that largely, if they can negotiate good rates, they are able to do that, but do also look for any funding they can find that would be for the uninsured population, so that they could provide services there. In conversations with people who have started these recently, they have also shared that the other operational cost that is helpful to them is to have 3 to 6 months of operational costs supported somehow, some way, through grant funding, if it was through a county partnership, but some way, just those first few months as they are sort of getting their feet under them, as they are making sure that they're filling those beds and doing those things. So that's been something that's been communicated to me. And I'm happy to reach out to the Stedman Group to see what they have. And I can also see about getting information about organizations that have recently started programs within Oregon
Yeah.
to get a sense of, is there any ballpark around bed cost or square footage or just something that might help us narrow down? I'd be happy to do that.
I think in the end, I think the most important part of all of this is going to be just engaging with City of McMinnville, make sure they're on the same page. I know McMinnville Community Task Force has concerns, but I just want to make sure the communication part of this is head the right direction. And one of the biggest reasons for that is because of the McMinnville funds. If they do see what we're doing and maybe Commissioner Sterrett throws her fishing hook out there and maybe snags some of those dollars and brings them back, I think that might be better for the program. So definitely let's keep them in the loop on how we progress through this. Anything else?
Well, I think the biggest thing, I just want to put it out, I mean, is with the board, if Lindsay and I started working on pulling some of this information and even putting together a solicitation for some type of A&E services or something to kind of come in, and we can, we could even come back and talk scope of work with the board as well, because it again, making sure that we have the right folks at the table, make sure if the board wants a public meetings component to it, if we want to, kind of put together a scope of work to at least maybe start the ball rolling. Because I also realize with the funding, it's really hard to go and ask for funding without a plan.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this might help situate or maybe answer a lot of questions that may be out there.
Yep.
Once we actually start to see if something takes shape or we actually have some concepts or
And knowing what Willamette Valley Medical Center has for their one detox bed that they have, is there something that could work out that this funding helps them expand that? Because I remember when we did that tour year and a half or 2 years ago, and they opened the one, they were actually looking at expanding it, and I think had a capacity up to 6.
That's what I recall as well. I think we would just want to be sure that they accepted the Medicaid population
Okay.
and would expand beyond alcohol.
Okay, so talking about parallels here, I think
Yeah.
that maybe that's a third parallel to all of this is to,
I definitely have a good relationship with the folks at Willamette Valley, and I'm happy to just reach out and get a sense of where they're at, if that's helpful.
cool. Anything else? Nope. Nope.
I think that's a great direction.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All right, we're on to G, which is consent agenda. I would move approval. Is there any further discussion?
None.
Commissioner Sterrett, any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to H, which is old business. H1 is consideration of approval in the matter of the findings and written decision in support of a mass gathering permit for the 2025 Memorial Weekend boat races at Rogers Landing Park to be held on May 24th, 2020, May 24th and 25th, 2025. The applicant is Newburgh Boat Club / Columbia Outboard Racing Association.
I move approval.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think that was an aye from
Oh, an
Commissioner,
aye.
yeah. Let's get just a visual thumbs up from Commissioner Sterrett just in case. Yep, there we go. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to H2, consideration of I declaring tax. What is the I in there?
There's a couple of different steps.
Oh, 1, got it. Consideration of 1, declaring the tax lot R3215AA00400 as surplus and authorizing its sale in the amount of $16,119 plus recording cost to the Geneva J. Hoy Trust. Item 2 is approving an access easement over tax lot R3215AA00400 to be recorded prior to conveyance, and item 3 is ordering the distribution of proceeds.
I'm recused on this one, so I'll defer to.
I would make a motion to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, and let the record show that Commissioner King recused himself. And that brings us to other business. I1 is consideration of approval for an intent to award to Sigmund Excavation and Construction, Inc., Allied Rock, in the amount of $236,000 for the Yamhill County 2025 chip rock procurement contract. I will say, just as I would move approval on this. Any discussion? I have one comment. I will say this is the second year, and it is getting harder and harder to find supplies of chip seal rock. It is a very specific rock. So I guess we're thankful just to find what we did here. So anyway, I made a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those, motion passes. Been trying to keep from being redundant. Item I2, consideration of approval of the amendment number 1 to the JRP-23-33 grant agreement between Yamhill County and the State of Oregon / Criminal Justice Commission, CJC, Board Order 24-34, moving funding in the amount of $178,140 from the Pretrial Justice Program to YCDCJ, Gender Specific Caseload PO, effective upon full execution through December 31st, 2025.
I'll move approval.
We have a motion of approval. All those in favor, or is there any further discussion?
Chair, I'd like to brag on this program a little bit on behalf of Jessica Beach, Community Justice, and all the folks that work on these types of specifics. So this was a reallocation of funding, and the Day Management Center is really focusing on women with children, women who have low-level crimes, and 18 to 25. And Gary Hurd and Pam Ramsey are facilitating this. And I just once again want to call out the dedication of the folks that we have working on behalf of our population. Pam Ramsey, I've seen her in action recently, unfortunately, at an overdose fatality review committee, and the lengths that she and her team go to wrap around basically 24 hours a day to keep someone alive and engaged in services. The dedication it's not a job to them. It's a complete dedication. And I don't think people know how important this is and how many of these types of programs we have going. So just to brag a little bit about that program, and thank Jessica for the work in getting this information out there.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you.
Chair, I would just say, if
yes.
you're not going to call for votes in opposition, I would just say unanimously approved.
Unanimous.
So you've got that in the record for clarity.
Yeah, I was trying to streamline things. I did that halfway through last Thursday,
Totally makes
and
sense.
I don't know if anybody noticed that or not.
I gotcha.
I did it on
Just-
purpose too, by the way.
I gotcha.
Unanimously approved. I think you're good.
On to item I3, consideration of approval of agreement between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and the Oregon Department of Human Services for behavior support services not to exceed $3,350,500 retroactive to February 1st, 2025 through January 31st, 2028.
Chair, I'd move approval, and just a little information. This is a program, a Medicaid program designed to keep people in their homes, give them the supportive services to remain at home because it's less expensive. than long-term care or managed care facilities. So I'd move approval.
Thank you. Any further discussion? None? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Well done.
Sweet. Item I4, consideration of a letter in support of House Bill 3119 relating to the delay of certain motor vehicle emission standards and declaring an emergency effective on passage. And this is brought to us by Commissioner Sterrett.
Thank you, Chair. This is House Bill 3119. This is in response to some of the California rules that have been, we seem to be in this Western States compact with Oregon, Washington, and Oregon following suit with some of the frankly disastrous climate-related policies that California has initiated. And this really is basically asking them to pump the brakes, so to speak, on the delay of the emission standards. And we're asking for support. We're asking that the House Committee on Climate, Energy, and Environment basically acknowledge that this would be really difficult for farmers, for people who own RVs, for truck manufacturing companies. Let's face it, the technology is not there for EV charging, and it would be counterproductive because people would hang on to their diesel trucks. They're not going to buy EVs. And there's just so many limitations. So I'm hoping that this could again be something that we unanimously approve to support and send this letter to Representative Lively and members of the House Committee on Climate, Energy, and Environment.
Do we have a motion?
I would move approval to support the letter of support.
And is there any further discussion?
I fully agree, and thank you, Commissioner Sterrett, for writing this letter and the support.
Yes, thank you for that. And I just want to, as a personal note on this, when you get down to diesel technology, has come a long ways. For our warehouse, we actually started buying a certain brand of forklift that are actually diesel, and they're clean burn diesel certified for warehouse. That's how clean our technology has gotten.
Yeah.
You can literally run a forklift inside of a warehouse now that's a diesel. So I support it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item I5, consideration of approval of a professional services contract between Yamhill County Administration and Sarah Architects Incorporated for interior modifications, departmental test fits, and move coordination not to exceed $146,427 effective upon completion through December 10th, 2025.
And
We-
Chair, I was
Sorry.
hoping to head you up.
I
before
had
you
the
to
note
read the whole thing.
after it, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna
So,
remove this one.
Yeah, I'm asking not to take action on it right now. There's still some work we need to do. It's not ready
Yep.
for approval.
Okay, yep, sorry about that. I literally wrote the note after it. I should have wrote it before it. Okay, moving on. We removed item I5. We're on to I6, consideration of a letter in support of the Conservation Collaborative. And I brought this forward. I sent you guys a letter yesterday after my soil and water meeting, and they requested that I bring this before the board to see if it's something that the complete board is interested in supporting. And what the basics of it is consolidation. So you're going to get your soil and water, your OSU extension, Oregon Till, Edible Landscapes, Greater Yamhill Watershed, USDA. Basically, we're trying to consolidate all these different services into one facility. And so they're going after grant funding and looking for letters of support as they start pursuing funding for this new proposed facility.
And is that all of those organizations are
I think it's-
interested in that? Or is
It's
that
in
just
the
soil and water?
very beginning phases. I would say that they're interested in it if they've included it into the letter.
Okay.
I can definitely follow up and confirm if there is one that's definitely sticks out to you and
No, I'm very supportive
Or
of the whole
advocate-
thing. I mean, yeah.
advocate for it or-
Yeah, very supportive of the whole thing, just the extensions and,
Yep.
those are big.
the
Big
one that I'm
services.
very excited about is going to be OSU extension because
Yeah.
if they end up if this new facility does come about, then that opens up a little bit more room for public works out there. I don't know what that looks like, but
Or if they're looking for a building. give me a
Oh.
call.
oh yeah. I
Yeah,
like
we may
that.
have to
Put on the sales hat.
How's that annex built?
Yes, yes, yeah. Anyway, I would make a motion to approve item I6. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We didn't hear it verbally. Commissioner Sterrett, can you just give us a thumbs up? Yep, we're good to go. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to J's, public hearings, there is none. And then we move to K, which is announcements. Commissioner King, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Last night was Yamhill City Council, presentations from Planning Commission, Water, Economic Development, open positions in the Planning Commission and the budget. So if you live in Yamhill, they are looking for a few applications there. They did appoint the budget committee, most of it. They have one open position left and a new city councilor. Congratulations to Patty Perrin, new city councilor.
Nice.
So they appointed her last night.
Was that Corrigan's empty spot?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Cause it was left over till 26. I think that makes sense. Then there was a work group across agencies in Yamhill County. Brian Young, our own, gave resources on emergency preparedness and a focus on vulnerable communities, especially in this, weather that we have, and otherwise, just whether it's fire or anything, just communicating with across different language barriers and so on. So had my first YCOM meeting as well. I learned that there were last year over 119,000 911 calls, and that generated almost 83,000 in routes. So just the huge number. And I think as we talk about those SIP funds that Commissioner Sterrett talked about last week and so on, that's again one of those things that we're talking about with the microwaves to generate across agency communications a little bit better. I'm very excited that we are all excited about that. So, and that potential. And I've been doing several ride-alongs with the sheriff or some of the deputies to some of the substations across the county. We're supposed to go to West Valley today, but I think we're going to cancel. There's been a lot of accidents already. I think their department is a little busy, so we're going to reschedule that. But it's been great to see the needs and just the savings. I think really what I'm learning about across the county that of having those contracts that save some of those cities some monies with some of our own FTEs and just general, that they don't have to carry the insurance and they don't have to carry the liabilities or the fuel costs and the full package of an FTE. So yeah, just been very supportive of what's happening there and maybe the potential of some expansion into other small cities eventually. So good, very excited.
All right. Commissioner Sterrett?
Out to our tax collector assessor, Derek Wharf, wanted to get an idea about some of the senior deferral numbers and let folks know that there is the option to have property tax deferral. We have 75 accounts in senior deferral, and we have 973 receiving a disabled veterans exemption, and that extends to spouses, surviving spouses. So if folks are interested in finding out if they would qualify, they can go to the Yamhill County website, look at the tax under tax assessor, and you can find out about the tax deferral for disabled and senior homeowners. Department of Revenue, my understanding is, will pay the taxes up until and they're deferred, and then they're paid when the house is sold. The other thing is I wanted to bring up regarding those community initiative project funding. Again, I know the sheriff's office is interested in the microwave project, so they will be submitting theirs by the 23rd if they make the decision to do that. Chair Johnston and I attended the AOC HHS meetings, the steering committee meetings. We talked about some bills that are some good and some not so good, and weighed in on that at the legislative committee. So I thank you, Chair, for being there for that. And also I wanted to, folks are getting notices if their kids are in public school, they're getting notices about February 19th being exclusion day. Exclusion day being the day that the schools are saying if you are not fully up to speed on the government schedule of vaccines, it's a total of 72 from the time a child enters school, 72 different shots, that they would be excluded from school. And I think if you look at some of the information coming out, whether it's from OHA or the various public health entities, is that it can be misleading. People are not being told that there is in Oregon medical and non-medical exemptions. You don't need to give a reason for a non-medical exemption. And you can go ahead to the Oregon, to OHA's website, and you can take a look at the exemption form, fill it out. And I would ask people, parents, to be educated about their rights in terms of their choices on their medical choices for their children. That's all I have.
Thank you for that. I'm going to follow up with a couple of the AOC items. I am on the Ledge Committee, and so Monday we pushed some of these back to steering committees, and I just wanted to touch on a couple. House Bill 3369, we actually recommended support of this, and it allows state treasurer to issue general obligation bonds for courthouse expansion. A couple more during natural resources. These ones definitely hit home for me. It's aquifer recharge storage. So it directs water resources to identify and reduce barriers for aquifer recharge. And there's also a secondary House bill to go with this that addresses and removes the barriers and revamps the permitting process. So very excited about that to see what that looks like for our water aquifers in our area. I know they're trying, I think they've implemented one of these programs 3 or 4 years ago in kind of that Umatilla area where they're pumping water during the winter out of the Columbia River and actually recharging the underground aquifers with that water. So I am very excited to see how this program rolls out through Water Resources. Another one to touch on, we did send back, returned it to the steering committee. It failed. It was the RV fees for campgrounds and abandoned RV funds, which is House Bill 3209, and then Senate Bill 687 was the local vehicle registration fees. This also failed and is headed back to the steering committee to see if they can, they're just going to reconsider it and see if they can, I guess, retool, modify, or add amendments to it, or we just flat don't support it. That was that was Friday and Monday. I'm going to back up a little bit because I have a secondary list here. So last Thursday night was chat with the chair. It went well. Very interesting conversation. We discussed anywhere from fire risks out Youngberg Hill Road, invasive weeds, farm deferrals. So really the farm deferrals were only really the direct county related topic, but it's interesting because I'm involved with these other groups from the fire department to soil and water district that would touch on like invasive weeds or fire risk. So that was kind of cool. I was able to either answer questions or do a follow-up with those different departments. Just a reminder that first Thursday of the month is going to be the next one, which puts it on March 6th, and it's at the Yamhill County Campus Building. And I did learn that it's the Hood Conference Room. It says Hood right on the door. So it's first floor just to the right. That's 6 to 7 p.m. Planning Commission meeting was canceled Thursday night. There was nothing on the docket. Friday and Monday were AOC. Tuesday, attended the regional economic meeting that our economic manager put on, which is Joya. She coordinated with Business Oregon, SEDCOR, and MEDP. It's nice to get kind of an update to see where we're at with the different programs and support that's going on around the county with the different groups. We will be putting together almost, I think we said quarterly or maybe bi-monthly, so we can just kind of all stay on the same page on what's going on in our region. Willamina City Council, that we discussed our upcoming changes to bus routes and services, and also what it's going to look like when we go to a fee-based service for our transit. McMinnville had a joint work session with their planning commission. They discussed urban growth boundaries, work plan, and land use efficiencies. I asked them to add the fairgrounds to that discussion to see what that looks like far as if the fair was to move out of McMinnville, and also what it looks like to rezone that into something besides light industrial. And they were very welcoming of that conversation. So I appreciate them adding that. At their city council meeting, which was right after their work session, they discussed equipment purchases for parks and affordable housing. They appointed 4 people to Affordable Housing Committee and the McMinnville Economic Vitality Leadership Council. That was actually the most interesting council night. So they both coincide with each other. Willamina starts at 6 p.m. and then McMinnville City Council starts at 7. And this was actually the first time I hit both of them and was done by like 8:30. So good for them for being efficient. Wednesday morning was Soil and Water. We already discussed that, and appreciate both of you signing on for that letter of support. And then tonight is Lafayette City Council and Fire Board meeting. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see how all that goes. Is there anything further? Oh, Ken.
Just quickly, just want to recognize and just put out there our public works facilities, sheriff's office, public works has been working
Yeah.
leading up to this event, this weather event. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen. Same thing with facilities, trying to keep our offices open and we're open and delivering services. So just thank you to all the crews and all their work that they're doing out there on
Definitely
keeping our roads
seen
open and safe.
De-icer on the road and all sorts of things.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Ditto. All right. Let's close her down. It is, if they're both right, 11:11. Thank you very much.